Now, I would say that before I show you this list, let me just say that this transformation process that I've been describing for you, whereby we are transforming away from the market into a centrally guided and controlled economic situation, this has the effect of converting economic risk into economic uncertainty. So let me spend just 1 minute explaining what I mean by that. Risk is a word that we use in economics to describe the simple fact of life that no person can accurately foresee the future. Nobody has a crystal ball. Okay, I'm a businessman. I'm thinking about opening a new business. I'm going to put a lot of my money into it. What happens if, after I sign the contract to spend all this money, the economy goes down? Well, then I'll probably lose a lot of money. What happens if the economy goes up like a rocket? Well, I'll probably be pretty good. I'll probably make a big profit. Well, do you know exactly which of those is going to happen? No. Could other variations happen? Sure, we could just have plain old ordinary, plain vanilla growth. But here's the good news. Even though I don't know exactly what's going to happen, I can look in the past and see how many recessions we've had over the last 100 years, how many booms we've had, how many just ordinary economies we've had. And I can attach probabilities to that and statistically boil all that stuff down to a single number, my expected payoff. And based on that, I can make an informed guess about what is likely to happen. And that's what I base my decision on. I can't be sure, but it's better than throwing darts. But how do I deal with the knowledge that the government, even though we have a bankruptcy law that spells out exactly how things should be done during bankruptcy, what if we have a government that says we're going to ask the bondholders who have top claim to the assets to accept shares of stock instead? And we're also going to give almost control of the company, a big chunk of control of the company, to the unions who work for the company. Who could have guessed that? Okay, that's uncertainty. So here's the point. Business can cope with risk. They know how to do it. In all societies, they figured it out. But no businessman in any society can cope with uncertainty. And so what they do is withdraw. They hunker down. And that's what we're seeing with our economy. So when you see this list, next slide. Okay, here we're told by the experts, the so-called experts, that these are our problems. These are the big issues. Can you see those in the back, incidentally? Can you read that? Okay, no need to read it to you. And now go to the second one. Okay, and that finishes out the list. Now, here's what I am asking you to seriously consider. I'm asking you to consider that these so-called issues are in fact not the issues at all. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that these are simply diversions. They're not the real problem. We can attack each one of these, but unless we attack the real problem, these are going to come back. Okay, so what is the real problem? Let me give you a list of what I think the real problem is. Again, we've been talking about this transformation process. How do you transform a system based on the rule of law and free market economics into a centrally controlled economy? Well, here's how you do it. You systematically dismantle the rule of law. The rule of law says, of course, that each person is to be judged based on their behavior and only their behavior. No favors to anybody. We just apply the rule, and the rule comes from a consensus of the population. It doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. That's an American principle. What about private property? What about Kilo versus City of New London? You've heard about that, I know. And yet these are the pillars, you see. The rule of law, private property. These are the pillars that support the free market. That's why our system has been so successful, more successful than any other free market system in the history of the world. It's the institutional support that we gave it. Capitalism being turned into crony capitalism. You know about Cylinder. Government increasingly pursues social justice instead of justice. I'm really thinking we ought to rename the Department of Justice. Government at all levels routinely uses tax money to conduct industrial policy in which they subsidize one thing because they think we ought to be liking it, when in fact we don't like it. So we put the brakes on oil and gas and coal, and we subsidize air, wind, and biofuels. Growth in government means growth in public sector unions. And yet it's the growth in public sector unions and the pensions and wages associated therewith that are bankrupting many American cities. Next slide. We denigrate business people, and yet there is no more honorable occupation than meeting the needs of our fellow man. That's what business people do. Denigrating the earning of profit, delegitimizing it, converting the tax system from generating revenue to exacting retribution and achieving redistribution. I found this quote from Andrew Mellon, and I thought how perfect it is. Quote, "I have never viewed taxation as a means of rewarding one class of taxpayers or punishing another. If such a point of view ever controls our public policy, the traditions of freedom, justice, and equality of opportunity, which are the distinguishing characteristics of our American civilization, will have disappeared. And in their place, we shall have class legislation with all its attendant evils." This was 1924. And yet today, the top 1% of all earners pay 40% of all federal income taxes. The bottom 50 pay zero. That is exactly what Mr. Mellon was talking about. A very dangerous proposition. So I would assert tonight that these are the real problems. If you want to attack something, these are the problems that have to be attacked. And basically they're in the form of us reversing the process of undermining them. We need to reestablish them. We need to respect them. We need to treat them with honor and dignity, because without these pillars, capitalism won't work. I appreciate your attentiveness, and if you have any questions, I'll try and take those. Yes, sir.
Is it true that commercial banks are told by the government to borrow money at 0.5% and repay the government at a 2% rate?
Can you give me a little more specifics on that? What would they be borrowing the money for?
In my impression is that they're just washing it, that there's no valid reason for it.
I see. Well, I don't know. I haven't heard that. I do know that if you look at the balance sheets of commercial banks today put together as a group, they're not near as many loans as they used to make. Credit is very hard to come by, and it's largely because the desire to borrow has just about disappeared.
To what extent do you think the conversion from our current tax system, which penalizes production and lets people who do nothing off the hook, if it were converted to the so-called fair tax system, which taxes consumption and does not tax production, to what extent do you think that has the potential of easing us out of this disaster over a shorter period of time?
Okay, Andrew Mellon said that, and he gave credit, as he should, to Adam Smith, because in The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith sets forth the principles of a fair tax system. The tax system should be used to generate revenues, and to do so in such a way that it interferes with the free actions of people as little as possible, and it treats people as equally as possible. But I would say to you that the real problem is not that you have the system we have here and we don't have the fair tax. I'm saying tonight that the real problem, the danger to our system, lies in the fact that people who have risen to positions of power think it is acceptable to use the tax system to punish one group of people and to reward another. For example, just think about not paying taxes. And yet, one of the things that makes America unique is that we treat all people the same. We don't have classes of people. But what does it say when a person is removed from the tax rolls? Doesn't that, in effect, make them a second-class citizen? I don't care if they only pay $10 a year. If they pay $10 a year and you're having a debate about the tax system, they're going to participate. But if they pay zero, what do they care about the tax system? You see, all that does is take a large group of people out of the debate. They're only in the debate when it comes time to talk about how to spend the money. Oh, okay, now I'm interested. But
surely
that undermines the whole idea of what America's about. That's the real danger.
Surely to be realistic about fixing that problem, we've seen a litany of efforts to revise the tax system, but it's always based on the existing system, and the revisions never amount to anything. I think what you have just explained to us rather supports the legitimacy and the value of a fair tax system, because under the fair tax system, you would pay tax on everything you consume, and nobody would escape. Even the drug dealers would not be able to escape. So that would be a powerful way to destroy this monster that we live with today. And it would also eliminate somewhere close to $400 billion of compliance cost, which nobody ever talks about.
Right. Another thing to think about is that one of the most frequent arguments that people in Congress give people like you is that we can't afford to do that. We'd lose too many revenues. To which you and I should be prepared to say, if you would go back to Article 1, Section 8, and do only those things, you wouldn't need that much money. See, that's the core of that's the core of the issue right there. Yes, ma'am.
But what stops the politician from putting that on top of some other tax and another tax and another tax? And how well are we doing? You got to start with who you're putting in the government. And you have to know the person.
And go into the rally and go into the meetings and learning who these people are. Because then you can go to their office and you can say, you told me on September the 9th that you were going to do this and you haven't done it, and I want to know why. It's us, y'all.
Well, since you mentioned that, let me just point out a website that I've just become aware of just recently. It's called votesmart.org, I believe. Is that right, Bob? You go to votesmart.org. You can access by zip code or the name of your representative, city councilman, state representative, whatever he is, and see his voting record. You can see how he's rated by conservative interest groups like Heritage. You can see how he's rated by liberal interest groups. It is a very valuable tool, very powerful tool, because you're right. Sometimes they say one thing, but they do something else.